What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video, and the following is a conversation I had with the one and only Dr. Leo Venus on Instagram Live. I'm doing a series of Instagram Lives with some of your favorite vegan YouTubers, content creators. This was the first one, and tomorrow I'm gonna be speaking with Hench Herbivore. So for now, enjoy.
Hello, Rafael. How are you doing?
Hey, how are you? I'm great. You?
Not bad, not bad. It's been a long time.
Yeah, it's been we haven't seen each other in a long time. It's been a couple of years actually.
Yeah, how are you
But
doing?
I guess,
Are you still living in Portugal?
yeah, still living in Portugal. I guess we haven't seen anyone in the past year, so
Yeah.
it's not just.
I'm living in an apartment with 13 people, so I'm forced to see.
Whoa, whoa! How's the COVID situation in there? In
Well,
that.
yeah, I mean, in Norway we're lucky. In Bergen we have it's super. We're super lucky. We have, I think, something like 600 deaths since it started, so it's very, very little. And we've been very good at, like closing things and controlling the spread throughout the year. So, yeah, and it's, Norway is a small place, it's very isolated, so that kind of thing. And check it out. It's very snowy out here.
Oh yeah. Actually, do you know what's funny? I've actually only seen snow like 2 or 3 times in my life.
Oh, really?
Because it doesn't like up close. I've only seen snow a couple times in my life, and I really never played with it. So
Yeah.
that's real.
Where were
That's
you
really cool.
saw the snow?
Actually, it was right here. It just snowed once in my life where I live. So yeah, and I saw it in Barcelona in Montserrat when I was there.
Yeah, I remember in Barcelona it's the same thing, right? It would snow for one day and then it would be gone 5 minutes later. So
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
yeah.
Okay, so I think everyone is already here, so let's start. I got a couple questions for you. We're going to talk a little bit about veganism, obviously, the most basic questions, but also some different questions that usually we don't talk about. I know you're a philosophy fan, so we're going to talk a little bit about philosophy, which I think is gonna be pretty cool. So to kick this off, actually everyone knows you, everyone knows your family and all, but not a lot of people actually know your story. I think you were one of the first ones in your family that is all vegan to go vegan. So why did you go vegan and how?
Yeah, awesome. First, you're gonna make me blush with all this everybody knows you business, but no, it's I think John is kind of the person who started the whole social media thing. But you're right, I was the one who kind of went into the whole vegan thing first in my family, and it was actually an ex-girlfriend who was getting into it. I had no idea. I barely knew what vegetarianism was, let alone veganism. I thought it was this crazy hippie movement, right? Just like.
Yeah. What year was it?
This was when I was 19, so that would have been 2012. Yeah, 2012.
Okay.
So starting to become quite a while ago.
Yeah.
But anyways, I was already doing my bachelor's degree in bioengineering, so I was already introduced to the whole, studies, research, confidence interval, statistics, all that kind of thing. And we got into a few documentaries, among which was Forks Over Knives, which is a very kind of serious professional documentary. There's lots of research, there's doctors and scientists, and you kind of got that impression that, wow, this looks very professional and serious. There must be something to it. It's not just some hippie movement. Not that there's anything wrong with that, right? So
Yeah.
because I was already in that background, I thought, okay, I have to check this out. I have to figure out what's behind this, right? So I started reading lots of research, and the more I read, the more I figured out, okay, I guess there's good science behind this, and it's not just some fad. And as a scientific person, I just had to admit that what I thought was right and what my parents thought was right, what my grandparents and my brothers and sisters and my friends, it was wrong, right? You don't need meat for protein, you don't need milk for calcium, you don't need fish for omega-3s, etc., etc. So that was kind of my first opening or kind of introduction.
How long did it take you from watching the documentary until researching, going vegan and all of that? How long was that?
I would say probably only like a couple of weeks. I was just
Okay.
That was basically what I was focused on for that time, and I just went plant-based. But again, I was more for the health benefits of it
Yeah.
in the first year. So I would still eat whatever I got if I was out visiting people or at a party or whatever. But, you know, about a year later, I got into the ethical part of it. And that's when I truly, I guess, went vegan. You know, a lot of people kind of still have this mix up with veganism, that it's like, oh, I'm vegan for health or I'm vegan for the environment. And these are really good consequences of veganism. But veganism, the definition is you're obviously trying to avoid hurting animals, right? That's the whole philosophy
Yeah.
of veganism. So that's when I guess I was truly vegan. And after that, I haven't looked back, and it's been a great journey for me.
Yeah, I actually have a similar story because I was already bodybuilding back then. I was already really into fitness and nutrition. I was counting my calories and macros and all of that. And what got me into veganism like that, just from one moment to another, was actually a talk from Dr. Michael Greger. And that was the first time that I realized that eating meat, especially eating the amount of meat that I was eating on a bodybuilding diet, wasn't healthy. And that was my first step into the diet. But I stayed vegan because of the animals, and that's the main reason, obviously.
Good stuff. So yeah, that's awesome. Michael Greger's a great guy. So you
Yeah.
thought you needed meat to, you just went to his talk and you were like, yeah, I need meat to, or I thought I needed meat to grow muscles until now.
No, exactly. I didn't went to a talk. I just watched the video on YouTube. But the most incredible part of the story is that I had never thought about going vegan or vegetarian. I didn't know anyone who was vegan or vegetarian. I also grew up in a small town, just like yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I just happened to click on a random video on YouTube, and it happened like that. In about 2 days, I went from the typical bodybuilding diet to the vegan bodybuilding diet, and I was 19 back there.
Yeah, difficult at first, or?
No, it was very easy because we, living on the countryside of Portugal, we come from the tradition of Mediterranean diets as well. So we still grow a lot of our own food here. I was used to eating lots of whole cereals, legumes, and all of that. So for me, it was kind of easy. But I did eat way too many legumes. Like I went from 25, 30 grams of fiber, because I was still eating kind of healthy, to 100, 150. And the first couple of weeks, it was hard. But after a while, I just adjusted, and it stayed like this. And in the past 5 years, because I've been vegan for 5 years now, a lot of other products have come into the market here. So I now regularly eat tofu, seitan, and all of that. So growing up in a small place like you did, coming from the village in Norway and then Barcelona, obviously. But how did your family react when you went vegan, and your friends as well? But mainly your family, because I know that you have a pretty traditional background in Norway.
Yeah, I mean, that's the great question, and awesome to hear your story as well, by the way. But yeah, you're right. The family part is the most difficult for most people, right? There's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of tradition, there's a lot of emotions and feelings around how the things are supposed to be at home with your family. And at first, well, you know, since I was kind of with this my first girlfriend ever, my parents would kind of freak out and be like, what if she got pregnant? They're gonna like kill a baby, and like, oh my god, it's terrible, this is a nightmare, whatever. But then, you know, as I was becoming the more like the professional in science in the family, I had a little bit of that kind of influence, if you'd like. Slowly but surely be like, well, take a look at this study, take a look at this study, take a look at this documentary, and you know, kind of slowly but surely introduce these ideas. But there's definitely a lot of worry. You know, I still have pictures now. I'm so lucky, I'm so blessed. It's one of the things I always get on social media is like, you are so lucky to have your whole entire family be vegan, because now they're pretty much all vegan. But man, I remember the first 2-3 years I'd get, you know, sent pictures from my dad and my little brother with the big steaks, like, oh, this is delicious, you know, and they'd be sent pictures. And you know, I come from it was almost a religion for us. Grill every Saturday, you know, we're half Brazilian. My dad was doing barbecues every weekend for 30 years in a row. So I was like, it was so ingrained in the family. But again, slowly but surely, I was pretty good at not being, I think also because I was living far away. I was living in Ålesund, a place in Norway, while they were in Spain. So there's a lot of distance between us. So I couldn't be that pushy. So it was kind of a nice, slow influence. Whereas with friends, I definitely had some trial and errors. I definitely did piss off a lot of people. I pushed a lot of people away because I was a 19-year-old kid. I didn't know how to communicate
Yeah,
these
I
things.
was 19 as well. Did you get your angry vegan face?
Oh yeah. Like everyone. Like how
Yeah.
people kill all, 70 billion animals a year. This is evil. I must be the scourge of evil in the world and fight the battle and cause more problems and more hatred towards veganism and a lot more work in the future to try to reverse that damage for sure.
Yeah, I think that happens to us all, and we need to be more pragmatic and more science based. And speaking of science based, why med school?
Yeah, I wish I had a good story for you there, Rafael. I had a lot of my classmates and colleagues were like, yeah, I always dreamt of being a doctor. Like my parents are both doctors. I come from a family of doctors. For me, never dreamt of being a doctor. No one in my family is a doctor. I don't really, never cared about being a doctor. It's just science was always, well, science and math. I was a big nerd for science and math. It was always the easiest things for me in school. Well, I guess I shouldn't be so, well, it's long enough time ago. I actually even took high school exams for my older brother when I was in middle school in math and stuff like that. So,
Really?
yeah. So it's, it was always, for me, it was, math was always, math and science was always easy. And then when I came to university and I finished my bachelor's, I was like, well, what's next? I don't want to be, dripping little solutions from one machine to the next, like a lab rat for the rest of my life. What do I want to do next? And I thought medicine is a pretty wide, it's a pretty big industry. It has lots of opportunities. And I was like, yeah, why not? And then I did an exam to see if I could get into med school, got in, and that was it. That's really how it happened.
So why did you choose not to practice medicine? Because you are already a doctor. You finished your degree a couple of years ago, or 1 year ago, or something like that. So why not practice? And do you have any plans in the future?
I just don't like sick people, Rafael. I don't like sick people. It's a good question. I mean, it's like medicine is such a wonderful field. I mean, it's so, it gives so much back, right? When you're helping people on a daily basis, you're changing lives, you're having an impact on the people that you're working with. It's super rewarding. It really is. But for me, it was kind of a mix of different things. The one aspect of it is that the medical system in most countries is very hierarchical. I'm just not very good with authority. I don't like listening to what other people have to say. And then there's a lot of this kind of like almost a bit robotic at times. There's a lot of, again, really stimulating work, but also a lot of just like follow the guidelines. Okay, step 1, step 2, step 3, follow the algorithm. And it's like, but the main thing, the main reasons for me would probably be the whole kind of the compromising my own values, because unfortunately today the medical system is very, very focused on treatment, surgery, and kind of symptomatic management of conditions instead of getting to the root cause. And this is especially in lifestyle-related disease, which, by the way, stands for 70% of the disease burden in Western society, right? So the majority of the things that people are suffering with, that people are being troubled with in their daily lives, is actually being caused by lifestyle. And instead of tackling the lifestyle in medicine, we have a habit of giving pills, giving procedures, giving surgeries, putting that I guess metaphorical plaster or bandage on them without actually tackling what's underneath. Think Dr. Michael Greger, now that you talked about him, he had a nice, I think it was him who had this nice analogy where it's like you step on a nail, right? You step on a nail, it goes through your foot. You go to the doctor, instead of removing the nail, right? So you're walking around with a nail in your foot, but you're getting painkillers. That's basically what we do for most lifestyle disease. And for me, to get to the point where I could actually focus 100% on really getting to the bottom of stuff, spending more time per person, changing people's lifestyles, I would have to give a lot of years of kind of compromising my values. And then there's the whole kind of lifestyle, like as a doctor in a lot of countries, you basically have no freedom to live life work, and that's it. So I decided for me, because of the fact that lifestyle is not something that you need to work, 100% in a hospital for 10 years in a specialty before you can actually learn to teach people to change their lifestyle. And I thought, it's not, for me personally, it wasn't worth the sacrifice that I had to make. But again, I have so many friends who are medical doctors and who are practicing and who are getting specialized in surgery and neurology and internal medicine and whatever else specialties. And I have nothing but respect for the field. But there are definitely a lot of problems that need to be fixed in the industry as a whole.
Yeah, I actually had a question on that a little later, but I can ask it now. Let's say you were in charge of the healthcare system of a country, of a whole country. Mm-hmm. You're Surgeon General of the US, let's say. What measures would you take? Would you implement?
Non-vegans go to prison. Man, that's a hard question. I mean, again, it's the healthcare system, like so many other systems, is very complex. Like, I'm not going to stand here and pretend to know exactly what needs to be changed and what kind of part of the system. There's so many layers that you have to go through. But again, I think it's what we're prioritizing. I think the budget would have to be changed. So in most countries, you're talking about less than 5% of the medical budgets going towards preventative medicine and going towards lifestyle medicine. Whereas a lot of the budget is going for the, the pharmaceutical treatments, the surgeries. That's where a lot of the money gets used. So definitely, I think it kind of changed in priority from just the fast in and out, give pills, give surgeries, to a more holistic approach. And again, that's a very simplistic, very short answer, and there have to be so much
It's
work.
like a mindset change, kind of.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Would you agree that measures such as nutrition and health education in schools and having some consults with nutritionists in schools would be a good measure?
For sure. I think lifestyle, nutrition, preventative, health or medicine in general, but also really importantly, I would say communication and psychology would be so
okay.
And that is because, well, I mean, in my school, the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland, which is, well, it's the biggest school in Ireland where medicine is taught. I think it was something like 6 or 7 years ago that they started teaching communication skills to doctors. Before that, doctors were, you're taught the book stuff, you're taught the theory, then go out in the world and heal people. And then a lot of these doctors are super book smart, but they're terrible at communicating with other human beings, right? So there's a lot of conflicts, there's a lot of miscommunication between patients and doctors. And also just knowing psychology, right? It's the same when we were talking about veganism, about talking about veganism to others. If you don't understand how human beings are run psychologically, what drives people, then, if you're just trying to throw facts at people, tell people what they should do, then, that's coming from a place of lack of understanding, and it's going to get you terrible results. So I think psychology, communication, and then, like you say, nutrition and life.
But how are you going to communicate when you get 15 minutes with each patient?
Exactly. That's also the problem. So it's a systematic or a systemic problem that needs to change. And that's what I'm saying. It's not a simple solution. It's not one thing that you can implement and boom, that's it. There have to be a lot of work going into it, and a lot of things would have to change. But you're right. Realistically, 15 minutes is not enough time to have a meaningful. I mean, sure, you can get maybe 1 or 2 good points in, but if you're talking about creating a structure and a plan to really change someone's life, then 15 minutes is not enough.
Yeah, and there's no follow-ups, especially when it comes to lifestyle medicine with lifestyle diseases. There's no follow-up like, okay, you come to me to see me because you have a heart problem. I'm going to send you to a nutritionist. You're going to get a diet plan. You're going to go to a personal trainer, get a training plan. There's nothing. There's no holistic perspective there. There's just, you're going to take these pills, and maybe when things hit the fence, when everything goes wrong, I'm going to put a stent on you or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's the traditional approach. Luckily, we are definitely seeing a shift towards more and more focus on prevention and lifestyle, and what we call the multidisciplinary team approach, where you're bringing in, psychologists, nutritionists, PTs, whatever, and trying to make a complete plan. It is kind of going in that direction, but we're way behind. So most places that work in a more traditional fashion is exactly what you say. It's just, you come in, I give you a pill, out the door, next person comes in. So it's very limited, kind of narrow-minded way of treating people. But again, I'm optimistic. I have hope that, because the evidence shows that, that this is what works, this is what actually helps people, then I think lifestyle is going to, if not just because the doctors want it, just also because the consumers and the patients and the people who want their health back want it. And that demand, I think, will definitely spur on a change in the medical industry going forward.
That's actually a really interesting point. Do you think people would actually change their lifestyle if they had the information? Because that's the answer most doctors will give when we talk about lifestyle medicine and explaining all of this stuff, is that, well, people won't change anyway, so I'm just going to give them the pill so they can stay alive longer or stay healthier longer or manage the symptoms, because no one wants to change their lifestyle.
Yeah. Well, again, I think that's a kind of human psychology question. It's not a simple, straightforward answer. Mm-hmm. I think when it comes to changing people's behavior, it depends on the person. For one thing, different people are motivated by different types of things. But it's definitely, that's not the doctor's call to make. It's not you're not in a position to say, well, people aren't going to change, so why bother, right? Your duty as a doctor is to give the best information to everyone, and then people can make their own choices. But of course, you do have influence as a doctor. Doctors are looked up to in society today. It's one of the most trusted fields in the world, even though by all means you're not supposed to trust what doctors say blindly. I for one had to ignore a few doctors in my past. Otherwise I would have probably removed certain organs that I didn't need to remove, but that's a story for another time. But no, for sure, I think it's understanding the emotional nature. I mean, a perfect story to illustrate this is a friend of mine who's specializing in Canada. He had a story of a diabetic patient who came in, right, and it's had lots of consultations. We talked about weight loss and nutrition and training and all these things that are the only way you're ever going to reverse type 2 diabetes. No pills is going to reverse it. It's symptomatic relief. It's like a plaster, it's like a bandage. And what he did in order to motivate this patient is, as a doctor, he used his position to really engrave some pretty scary, like it actually frightened the patient, but with the intention of helping them. So what he did is he actually went over all of the most severe consequences of type 2 diabetes, like the nephropathy
and all of that.
Yeah, the kidney failure, the loss of sensation, so the amputations of limbs, the eye problems, the heart attacks, and actually showing examples of people who have died of these things and saying, look, this is where you're going unless you actually change your lifestyle, right? So again, there's a lot of different ways to do it, but I think that's why I think communication and psychology, when you're in a doctor-patient's relationship, when you're in a healthcare profession, it's so important.
Yeah. How does the medical community see veganism, and especially at universities, from your perspective, obviously?
Yeah, well, I mean, universities are pretty traditional institutions, I have to say. I mean, whenever industries change, universities are usually not the ones that are right up there with them, right? They usually,
which is actually mind-blowing, right?
Yeah.
That's where the innovation should happen.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of curriculums are based on really old information. When in RCSI, when we were studying, we had a tiny bit of nutrition. I think, we well, first of all, we were taught by a very overweight lady who said she had trouble feeding her kids veggies and all that kind of stuff. So it was like, not a very, you're not getting an example of someone who seems to be very successful in their own lives, right? The practice, what you preach type of thing. But more importantly, the curriculum was so outdated. I think we were taught the food pyramid from 1992. That's actually, that's older than I am. And we're being taught in current day medical schools, right? So it's embarrassing, to be honest, but that's what a lot of and veganism in general. The thing about doctors is we don't get taught this in medical school, but we are taught how to appraise literature, how to look into studies, how to look at the science, right? So anyone who takes the time to actually look at veganism with, well, if they're doing it objectively, because doctors are human beings like anyone else, they might have their emotional biases, they might have their own blocks, their obstacles to allow them to open their minds to something new. So some doctors might never be open to veganism, or at least not with some really strong psychological influence. But most doctors who are open-minded, who look into the literature, they'll be like, yeah, veganism is a great thing. It's good for the environment. It's good, obviously, for the animals. And a balanced whole food diet can be amazing for your health. So, it's preventative for some of our biggest killers. So there's definitely a lot of doctors who are for it. In my personal experience, I had tons of times where I had to like sit in the front of the class, correct the teachers, or like kind of lecture the whole class and be like, don't listen to this guy. I remember one time, for example, there was this consultant hematologist, right? Like the top doctor in the hospital for hematology. And he was doing some cases with us. And one of the cases he showed was a lady who had a shortness of breath for a few months. She was very pale. The typical symptoms basically of she had palpitations or like fast heartbeat. Basically the typical symptoms of someone who has iron deficiency anemia. And then towards the end of the case, he says, oh, and this is a very, very big tip. 6 months ago, she's changed her diet to a extreme vegan diet. And I was like, oh no. So, after people are like, oh, iron deficiency anemia, yeah. I had to like put my hand up. And then he goes like, yeah, sure. And then I used to always sit in the front row so that I could like be right in their faces. So then said, okay, Leo, whatever. And then I turned around and I just talked to the entire class. Like I just ignored the guy and I just talked to the entire class being like, okay, so the first thing about this is that the incorrect assumption that's being made here is that veganism has to do with iron deficiency anemia. Iron deficiency anemia is caused by a deficiency in iron. Whether you're vegan or not, that doesn't matter. It's the most common deficiency in the world, and veganism by no means is a cause for iron deficiency anemia. There are a lot of vegan sources of iron, etc. And then I started talking about different sources, and then I said something like, yeah, if anyone wants to know more, let me know. And then I turned around and I just see the consultant, the hematologist, just standing there, and he was just like, yeah. I mean, no, fair enough. It's true. There are plants that have iron. Yeah, it's true. And just like uncomfortably went on the next case. But stuff like that I have to do all the time.
Yeah, now let's get a little more into the science of food. I have a question that is not a lot of people know about it. Not a lot of people talk about it because it's getting pretty deep. But we are also pretty deep into nutrition. So let's go. We know that a very high protein diet may not be healthy, but especially a high consumption of the amino acid leucine might bring some trouble when it comes to IGF-1, when it comes to mTOR, aging, and all of that. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. Do you try to restrict your protein intake at all, or in your day-to-day life, or sometimes? And do you try to restrict your leucine intake, given the science, or do you think that it's still too early for that, or you really don't care because you're just trying to build muscle?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, it's one thing I talk about, and I really appreciate, by the way, your scientific approach. I know you do a lot of videos with the research and being evidence-based, and that's exactly what we need, because we have enough clowns talking about their opinions and how so many people have told them how they feel amazing, whatever. But the science is what we need. So that's awesome. And yeah, when it comes to leucine, when it comes to a lot of these other sulfur-containing amino acids like methionine. The first thing I always talk about is that being big and muscular and being healthy are two totally different things, right? All the evidence we have suggests that if you want to be optimally healthy as absolutely possible, you're probably better off being a little bit on the lighter side. You don't want big hulking. That being said, you can definitely build muscles on a plant-based diet. And just when you ask me, do I try to avoid I do take protein powder. I do eat a lot of food in general because I am interested in, I like the feeling of being, able to move big objects and be explosive and be fit, and build muscle as well. Like it's definitely something that I'm focusing on. But just by the mere fact of following a whole food plant-based diet, you are automatically going towards the paradoxical incomplete, right? Makes it sound like it's a bad thing, the incomplete profile, which is automatically quite a bit lower in a lot of these amino acids that people worry about. So just by virtue of being on a whole foods plant-based diet, you are limiting a lot of these more dangerous amino acids, which will actually have a protective effect on a lot of these worries. So that's pretty much what I do, is I just get the healthy sources of protein, which, for those of you who are wondering why it's even called incomplete, that was that was something that started from the dairy industry in the 70s or so, where they found that most animal proteins had not amino acids or essential amino acids, which means amino acids that we can't produce, that we must get from diet, right? The fact isn't that there was no essential amino acids in plants, but that there were higher proportions in certain animal foods and certain amino acids were lower in plant foods. So they said, oh, complete amino acid, it was a marketing tool. It was like, oh, these animal foods are complete, they're better, more is better, bigger, stronger, whatever, become the manly man you're supposed to be. And we fell for it, like, marketing is so much stronger of an influence than, scientific research papers, unfortunately. But then paradoxically, as we're getting more and more science, we're seeing, well, this incomplete amino acid profile is actually way better for us, So yeah, I would say that's probably, the best thing you can do is focus on the whole food, plant-based foods, and the rest, as long as you're, from a health point of view, you don't need to worry about protein. But if you are going to try to build muscle, then you're better off doing it on plant-based proteins.
I'm going to tell you what I do about leucine in a while, but on that point of the complete proteins, in my talks, I always use an example, because when you actually go and look at the amino acid content in different foods, you're going to realize that all foods have all essential amino acids. It doesn't really matter the food, it's just that they get lower quantities from one or the other, but they're all there. And the example that I use is I ask the audience if they think that if they ate only lettuce for the whole day, just lettuce for an entire day, but ate enough calories, would they get enough amino acids? And
that's good.
Everyone always says no, because lettuce is the worst protein source ever. But when you go and look at it, and you realize that if you ate around 2,800 calories of lettuce, which is a lot, obviously, but it's the average amount of calories that most athletes will eat, 2,800, you would get 180 grams of protein and all the amino acids. So no one ever forgets this example that I like to use, but obviously lettuce is a horrible source of protein and a horrible source of nutrition overall, because it's mostly water.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's an amazing example. How much did you ever calculate how much lettuce you'd actually have to end up eating?
20 kilos. Yeah, 20 kilos.
Woo!
Not impossible, though.
Yeah, I mean, that's impressive. 20 kilos. You're a lean, green eating machine.
Yeah. But about leucine, what I do, because I also take protein powder and I am also trying to build muscle. But over the last couple of years, I started paying more attention to that. It's not something that I worry a lot about with my leucine intake, and I try to have a higher than average leucine intake. But probably when I get older, I might try to cut that down a little bit, because right now I'm young, I can handle it. But also what I did was I shifted my protein supplements. Were both sponsored by Vivo, so this is great to talk about. Vivo Life has two protein powders. There's the Perform that has BCAAs in it with extra leucine, and then there's the Ritual that doesn't have any extra BCAAs added. And I actually switched around. I used to take a lot of perform with the BCAAs. But to try and cut down a little bit on my leucine content, I switched to the ritual, and that's the one that I take the most now. I still have some perform, especially now that I'm on a weight loss phase, trying to cut, and I have to maintain muscle mass.
Yeah.
But mostly, I'm gonna stick with the ritual protein. I don't know what's your medical take on that.
Well, no, I think it's definitely not a bad thing to do. And by the way, for those of you who are watching, BCAAs or BCAAs just means branched chain amino acids, and they include leucine, isoleucine, and valine. So leucine is one of them. And so if you're removing that, then obviously you're lowering your intake of leucine. But yeah, I think, I always tell everyone, like, I'm also sponsored by Vivo. I take Vivo myself. But it's not necessary to take protein powders, especially not if you're not like really trying to build muscle. And even if you're trying to build muscle, like, you can do it with foods. It's just a lot more work. Like, you have to really plan your diet and make sure you're eating a lot of food and a lot of high protein foods all the time. And really, you have to be disciplined. You have to be like, okay, especially if you're busy, you have a work life, you have to kind of meal plan and meal prep and bring your Tupperware and whatever. For me, I'm just a lazy soy boy. I like to just throw in the powder, throw in some bananas. That's it. My protein is taken care of.
Do you have a protein target that you try to hit every day?
Well, I mean, again, according to the research, it's when you're, you want to optimize muscle gains. Again, this has nothing to do with health. For health, you need something like 0.8 grams per kilogram of lean body weight. But it would be somewhere between 1.6 and 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. So,
and that's what you try to hit?
Yeah, so for me that would be around 180 grams, right? I don't really measure my food that often, but yeah, when I do, I'm usually somewhere between 150 and 200 grams of protein. It varies a lot as well. It's not like I eat the same thing every day. But for me, that's definitely the hardest part of building muscle. It's not working out. Like, I'm great at going to the gym and pushing myself and destroying my workout, but it's just getting enough food in. And that's whether you're vegan or not. Like, if you're not vegan, then the same thing. You have to be stuffing yourself with food, especially if you're not taking supplements, to make sure to get out those optimal things. And again, this is not the health goal here. So this is not something to emulate if you're not trying to optimize your muscle gains. And even if you want to be fit and healthy, it's totally doable, just focusing on being as healthy as possible. It's just if you really want to optimize, right? If you want to go from, okay, you're fit, you have muscles, whatever, to I want to see how much muscles I can build naturally as much as possible, then that's when you take the extra step to start thinking about really eating high protein all the time or taking protein powders, etc. But if you're just trying to be healthy, you can have muscles, you can be fit, whatever. It's no problem.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I try to get 1.8 grams per kilo of body weight per day. So sometimes protein powder helps, but it's mainly when you're buying protein powder, you're buying convenience. That's what you're buying. It's just that. That's actually, I always say that the best ad for a protein powder would be convenience. And the protein powder would have written on the packaging just convenience. You're paying for the convenience of having this high quality protein source that is just easy to use. But talking about a caloric surplus, there's also a discussion right now going on. If a caloric surplus, even if you're just eating healthy foods, whole foods, plant-based, is a caloric surplus healthy? Even if you have healthy weight and all of that, do you think that there's a problem with being in a caloric surplus for a long time? Or it's no problem? Because usually I bulk for about 2 years, so I'm on a caloric surplus for about 2 years, and then I do a cut for like 3-4 months, something like that. But do you think that a caloric surplus, even if it's with healthy food, it's always bad? Or can it still be healthy, or we really don't need to worry about it, and the most important thing will be the foods that we actually eat?
Awesome question. And first, let me just comment. I think, if you said anything like this in a mainstream bodybuilding place, like I bulked for 2 years or 3 years in a row, people would be like, "What the hell?" I pulled for 3 months and I'm like super chubby. But again, if you're focusing on whole foods, it's so much more difficult to put on unnecessary fat. And this is one of the misconceptions. Like 1 calorie is not always 1 calorie. There have been plenty of studies showing that depending on the source of food, 1 calorie can have a different impact biologically and metabolically on you than a calorie from a different source. So plant-based foods have a tendency to promote weight loss even when they are controlled for calories compared to animal foods. So even if you're eating the exact calories, plant foods will have a tendency to promote weight loss. But yeah, totally depends. Again, when you're talking about is it healthy or not, I think it's definitely fine to be on a caloric surplus. It depends as well, what is your BMI? If you're becoming overweight, then obviously you don't want to be going on a surplus. If you're going from a BMI of 20 to 22, fine, no problem. It's there's a healthy range of body fat that you can have. But again, if you're going to say optimize, I want to be as healthy as absolutely possible, then there's very few things that have such a large evidence base for it and such a really set in stone proven benefit to your long-term health and your longevity than fasting and caloric restriction. So definitely, if you're trying to optimize things, then being in a caloric surplus all the time is not the best way to go.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question about fasting. Nowadays, we got people like Walter Longo, we got people like David Sinclair talking a lot about aging, protein restriction, calorie restriction. What's your take on fasting? And most importantly, what does the science say? Is it healthy, or do the benefits from fasting come from the fact that people actually cut out the bad food that they were eating?
Yeah, so it's actually both, and that's what's really interesting about fasting. Like, yes, you're taking away the bad stuff, but also even on top of that, if you're eating super healthy, there's actually an added beneficial effect of fasting where you're turning on different metabolic pathways that is actually going to promote repair and basically preservation of your tissues and longevity. So it's a super, super interesting thing. And again, there's very little things that have such a big evidence base for it. When it comes to fasting for myself, I like to do once a month. I like to do at least a 24-hour water fast. And then maybe once a year, I'll do like a 3-day water fast where I'll go, have, then next day, no food, next day, no food, next day, no food. And then on the 4th day, I'll have breakfast. And it's surprisingly easy. You're not going to be smashing gym workouts or like running marathons, but you can function pretty easily. Usually the first day is pretty difficult. And then after that, it's easy peasy. And that's actually one of the biggest surprises when I learned about do you know how long the average human being can go without food, Rafael?
40 days, something like that?
Yeah, that's a good guess. Most people say like, 10 days or something, but it's actually 80 days on average.
Jesus.
It's almost 3.
Do you know what the world record is?
I can't remember, but something like over a year, right?
Yeah, it's 420 days or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, but again, so fasting, the really cool thing about fasting is that it prolongs your life, but it actually also is very, very therapeutic for a lot of the lifestyle diseases. There's a lot of centers now that are having tons of success with things like type 2 diabetes, with things like heart disease, with things like high blood pressure, where they're actually putting people on a controlled, medically supervised water fast and reversing these diseases that people, have been taught that even in medical school, we're often taught these are chronic, irreversible diseases. There's nothing you can do but manage. And then people are going to these centers and coming out in perfect health. So both therapeutically and in terms of longevity, fasting is a really, really interesting subject.
Okay, now let's talk about diabetes for a second, because there are a lot of misconceptions about what causes diabetes, and people are always worried about carbohydrate intake. There's the saying, when you're eating a lot of carbs, that you're going to get diabetes or something like that. What's your take on that, and what does the science say?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of my it used to be one of my biggest pet peeves, one of the most annoying things for me to talk about before, because it's like everyone thinks this way, and it's kind of, again, due to marketing, due to the low carb fads, due to basically pandering to emotions rather than science, right? When it comes to science, it's very clear. all the data we have, the people who eat the most carbohydrates have the lowest incidences or the lowest risk of type 2 diabetes when you're looking at proportions, right? Obviously, this is an oversimplified, statement. There are different types of carbohydrates. Not all carbohydrates are good for you, just like, in the low carb movement, you could say not all carbohydrates are bad for you. Obviously, table sugar, added sugar, refined carbohydrates, white wheat flour, all of these processed carbs are definitely not good for us, right? The wider the bread, the sooner you're dead. But when it comes to whole sources or unrefined carbohydrates, complex carbohydrates, these are extremely healthy for us. And all of the data, whether you're talking about prospective cohort studies or randomized controlled trials or systematic reviews, meta-analyses, they all show the same thing. The higher intake of legumes and oh man, what is this? Am I even a real vegan if I'm forgetting this? What's the name? Whole grains. Oh man.
Whole grains, yeah.
Am I even a real vegan? The more legumes you're eating, the more whole grains you're eating, the more fruits you're eating, the better your health is and the lower your risks of these lifestyle diseases, such as type 2 diabetes. So big misconception. Sugar and carbohydrates are not necessarily bad for you as long as they're the unrefined, unprocessed, complex, natural carbohydrates that you find in the natural foods. But then, yes, refined, processed, white flours and added sugars, definitely not good for us, and we should 100% avoid them. But the science is very clear. Carbohydrates are not the enemy.
We have a very interesting question here, and I think there's an underlying issue with the mentality of this question, and it's a great question. But my mom has diabetes, and doctors never told her to stop eating meat. Why? We already talked a lot about the health system, but there's also an idea here that some vegans have, that you just can't eat any meat at all. You have to be 100% vegan, 100% whole foods, plant-based to be healthy. Do you think that's the case? I know that we have to make a difference here between people who are actually sick right now, and those people probably need to be extra careful. But for the average person, would you say that you have to be vegan in order to be healthy or to maximize your health, or you can eat some animal products here and there?
Mm-hmm. That's a great thing, and again, it comes down to the psychology. If you want to be an effective advocate and you want to influence the people around you, then you don't want to come across as this emotional, irrational, biased vegan, right? And one of the things that you hear is people saying like, "Oh yeah, if you you'll definitely be healthiest if you eat no animal products whatsoever." Now, the science is very clear. Obviously, going vegan is way better for the environment than having some animal products, and then going vegan is obviously better for the animals. Like that, these are things that are given. There's no real rational arguments against them. But when it comes to health, we can say that a predominantly or an almost completely plant-based diet definitely seems to be the healthiest. Whether that means 100% or not, we don't have a conclusive data. There is no conclusive science to say 100% plant-based diets are healthier than a 97% plant-based diet. We don't have that. Fish is another one. I don't eat fish because I'm vegan. But there is a ton of, of course, there are some risks. There are high, levels of pollutants in some areas, and some sorts of fish have higher levels than others. You're talking about heavy metals such as mercury. You're talking about PCBs. So there are potential risks. But when you're talking about the holistic picture, the entire perspective, the majority of the evidence, the majority of the literature says nothing but really positive things about eating fish and seafood for our health. But again, a majority plant-based diet is the one that accrues the most health benefits to human beings. But no, the short answer, if you want to be a rational and a realistic vegan, and trust me, you're going to get way better responses if you tell people, actually, you don't have to be vegan to be healthy, right? Yeah. Veganism is an ethical thing, but definitely mostly plant-based is what the science shows. I think Denmark, they just had their food guide go down to 300 grams of all meat per week. So that means everything from meat to chicken to everything, at most the upper limit 300 grams per week. Norway, I think, is 500 grams. And this is like the most, right? Not even the optimal. But most people are eating 3, 4, 5, 10 times those levels, right? So
Yeah.
It's totally, again, it's understanding human psychology, understanding people eat based on traditions and emotions and culture rather than rational logic. It's kind of like they do in the sales industry. They talk about marketing. Marketing is so effective because we human beings, we buy on emotion, and then we defend our decisions based on logic. So we use logic to defend our decisions, but we make most decisions based on our emotions.
Yeah, I could stay here and talk with you for the whole day, but let's get to our last question. And this is the part where we talk a little bit about philosophy, because I know you like philosophy. You've made a couple of videos about it, and I also really like it. I usually say that I'm a rational vegan. I went vegan because of logical reasoning, because I just couldn't find any argument that could morally justify me eating meat. Because if we don't have the necessity, the biological necessity to eat meat, then there's no argument to make us eat meat, because you can just go to the supermarket and get any other food. So, do you agree?
On a
Yeah,
island with nothing but a pig, bro.
that's actually the question that I'm gonna ask, but in a more formal way. So, would you agree with Kant that there's categorical imperatives, that being that some things are always wrong, it doesn't really matter the context? Or would you side with Stuart Mill, saying that things are morally wrong or right depending on the context? For example, is it always wrong to kill animals, or can it be morally justified depending on the context? For example, if you were on a desert island with a pig.
Yeah, I would definitely be more for the second one. Again, I am vegan for the animals, but I've said this before. If first of all, just a funny kind of comical way to answer that question. First of all, it's a hypothetical, right? We're not in that.
Yeah, obviously.
And we're going. It's literally, do I pick this or this at the store? So that's what we're talking about, right? But even in the desert island, well, if there are pigs, if there are animals, they're eating something. Why can't I figure out what they're eating and then have that instead? Right?
Let's say that they have nothing to eat there.
Animals who are living on pure air and water. Okay. Well, I've said this before as well. 100%. I am realistic enough to say I value my life more than other random animals. Even though I love animals, and that could even be stretched further, even to include humans. If I have the choice of saving my own life or saving a random person who I don't know, of course I'm going to save my own life, right? And then that goes same for animals. If I have to eat an animal to survive, of course I would do it. But that's not the situation we're in. That's not the world we live in today. So again, it's about being realistic and rational, as you say, and then understanding people. I think most problems in the world, whether we're talking about misunderstanding each other, we're talking about interpersonal conflict, or even societal conflict, even political issues, racism, discrimination, all of these things, even crime in society. Most of these issues did not come from an inherent nature of people being good or bad. It comes from a lack of knowledge. It comes from us not being able to understand what's happening, understand people's psychology, understand the communication that is going on behind the words, behind the symbols that words are, right? Words are just symbols of meaning, and people interpret them in different ways. But if you really could understand everything that is going on, then there would be no problems. And of course, there are a lot of problems that aren't going to be solved for a long time, but that shouldn't be a discouragement for us not to try to solve things, because human beings, we're good problem solvers. We can solve a lot of problems, and the harder the problem, the more rewarding it's going to be to solve it. And I think, again, I'm an optimist. I think we're going in the right direction, and within our lifetimes, I definitely think veganism is going to be the new norm for sure.
Yeah, that's actually, I was just going to ask you that. Do you think in our lifetime we're going to have a vegan world, especially in the Western countries, because we know that it might take a while for the rest?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I have so many friends who aren't vegan, but their morals, their values, they're pretty much the same as me. Like they don't want to hurt other people or animals. They don't enjoy animal cruelty. They don't enjoy causing pain. I mean, I met this girl the other day who's like, she's super, super nice. She works with animals, like professionally. She takes care of animals. And it's so glaring to you as a vegan who is in this perspective. But she told me, you know, like every animal she's had personal contact with, that she's worked with, whether it be she's worked with pigs, she's owned rabbits, all of these animals, even snails, she won't touch them, she won't eat them. But animals she hasn't had personal contact with, she can eat those because it's outside.
Actually, Melanie Joy wrote a lot about that with carnism with her book, Why We Love Dogs, Eat Pigs, and Wear Cows. I don't know if you read it or if you're familiar with her work.
With her work a little bit. I haven't actually read the entire book, no.
Yeah, but it's basically that. She talks a lot about that, how people can morally justify in their heads doing those types of things. And it's really interesting. And it's actually fascinating how our brains can just have double standards in so many ways. There's a question: can you survive or even thrive in a wild environment without meat and without agriculture? Well, that's also an hypothetical because we're probably not gonna do it anyway.
I would say no, purely because of B12. Again, that's not the world we live in. You know, we have B12 supplements.
Wouldn't you say that you could get B12 from drinking stream water and all of that?
I wouldn't say you will get enough for optimal health, no.
Okay.
Very, very small amounts of B12 in natural water. You could make a case for eating, you know, excrements, but no, again, I wouldn't. And there would have to be huge amounts too. You'd have to eat like pounds of shit, actually, literally, to be able to get enough B12. And then there's the duckweed that came out that only grows in certain times of the year. So naturally in the wild, I think you'd have a hard time surviving on a vegan diet. But again, this is a typical in psychology. I like to talk about this cognitive distortions. These are subconscious beliefs that we hold that sometimes do not actually align with reality. And one of the main ones that you have there is this kind of unrealistic type of thinking around exactly this type of thing. Like, well, it's the nature fallacy. Like, just because it's natural, it's better. Like, yeah, a lot of things that are natural are better, but that doesn't mean that everything that is natural is better. Like, we all do things that aren't natural. And it's, you know, the whole black and white thinking. It's all or nothing. It doesn't have to be that way. There's always nuance. There's always something in the middle.
That's the name of a logical fallacy, the black and white fallacy.
Yeah, that's another distortion. Yeah, exactly. So that's another thing I would recommend people read into is look at cognitive distortions. Even Wikipedia has a nice page. You can actually go through the list, and you'll read so many of them. And people.
There's a website called Your Logical Fallacy Is. And you can just go there and see all the fallacies. And there's another one, Your Cognitive Bias Is. And this is just stuff that I love. I've actually just finished an online course from the University of Auckland about critical thinking. And they go deep into all of this. And this is a subject that I am very, very fascinated by. I'm not sure Instagram's going to cut me off at 1 hour because sometimes it does. Yeah, so thank you so much for coming on. Especially, this is my first live stream on this page, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let's stay in touch, and obviously I'm gonna reach out to you again, especially when I'm launching the book, the English version of the book, hopefully in October. I'm still seeing how that's gonna happen. Thank you everybody for being here. Hopefully this was useful, and the whole conversation will be on my Instagram in a while, so you can just go and watch the whole thing. So thank you so much, Leo, and
thank you as well, and thank you for having me, and keep up the great work, man. Like
well, he didn't cut off. He didn't cut off at 1 hour.
Yeah, I get to do a proper goodbye.
Yeah.
Great work again. I really appreciate the evidence-based approach you have and all the work that you're doing. And hey, if you want to do anything in Portuguese, I need to practice. So podemos fazer vez por vez, eh?
Okay. I'm gonna charge you on that. Okay, let's do it. Let's also do it on my Portuguese Instagram page. Okay, awesome.
All right. Take care, Rafael, and thank you everyone who checked in, and we'll talk soon.
We'll talk soon. Thank you, everybody.